Hello viewers, welcome to my new YouTube channel Archi Palette, meant for presenting diversified perspectives on the study of architecture. My name is Apurva Singh. I am an architect. I am presenting my first video of the playlist named Architecture Design Fundamentals. In this video, named Introduction to Architecture, I will discuss about architecture in detail and also architectural systems and order. So let's begin the session. As we all know, architecture is the art and science as well as technique and profession of planning, designing and building and supervising the construction of new buildings and also landscapes, communities and furnishings in their totality. It is both the process and the product of sketching, conceiving, planning, designing, and constructing buildings and other structures and examining their environment in accordance with the principles of unity, strength, and aesthetics. In short, it is a style and method of design and construction of buildings and other physical structures. To describe architecture in two words, it means articulation of spaces. Articulation is the geometry of form and space. Architecture system is the defining of object in the surrounding space. To articulate something is to express it. In architecture, articulation means to delineate spaces so different functions are clear and architecture is meaningful. So therefore, it is understood that all architecture endeavors are targeted to the creation of space. It was famously said by Charles Correa, the great Indian architect, that architecture is not an object to be looked at, but an energy field to be moved through. From this, we understand that architecture is the built realization of a particular concept or idea. This idea can be about construction or the way people will use a building or how the buildings fits into the physical or the social environment or landscape. When talking about architecture in terms of the great architect I.M. Pai, he says, life is architecture and architecture is the mirror of life. Another famous architect, Renzo Piano, says, one of the great beauties of architecture is that each time it is like life starting all over again. And the legendary architect Zaha Hadid mentioned, I don't think that architecture is only about shelter. It should be able to excite you, to calm you, to make you think. Architecture is a social art that touches all human beings at all levels of their existence, everywhere and every day. It impacts society in many different ways, such as designing for social causes, cultural impact, promoting social interactions, impacting psychology, mitigating the impact of global warming and natural disasters. Architecture is a matrix of human civilization, an authentic measure of the social status and an evocative expression of the ethos of an era. Also, architecture that has been recognized as great has been harmonious with nature and its immediate environment. When conserved, it is heritage, and when it ruins, it becomes archaeology, reconstructing telltale pictures of the past civilizations. Architecture calls for originality, creativity, conceptualization, perception, aesthetic values, and a holistic judgment of people, places, objects, and events. Creativity is the essence of architecture, and harmony an essential aim of architects. Architecture is primarily the art and science of designing spaces for serving the multifarious activities of human beings and for meeting their specific needs in a meaningful built environment. When various engineering services are rationally combined, with architecture's basic elements of space, structure, and form, the performance of human functions and the operation of mechanical utilities become efficient, pleasant, and fulfilling. Now, coming to the design process, architecture is the design activity. From the macro level, like urban designing, landscape architecture, to the micro level, like construction details and furniture. The architect contributes to the process of creation through interpretation of the problem, inspiration in the design solution, and originality stemming from personal style, which defines the work as individual and unique. Generally, architecture is conceived, designed, and realized and built in response to an existing set of conditions. These conditions can be purely functional in nature or reflect in varying degrees the social, political, or economic climate. The existing set of conditions, that is a problem, is less than satisfactory, and a new set of conditions, a solution, is desirable. The art of creating architecture is a problem solving or design process. The architecture design process must be depicting architecture as the highest quality of design, providing firmness, commodity, and delight. Firmness refers to structural integrity and durability. Commodity refers to spatial functionality, or in other words, serving its purpose and fulfilling the function for which the building was constructed. Delight means that the building is not only aesthetically and visually pleasing but also lifts the spirits and stimulates the senses. So, we see that both aesthetic and practical factors should be taken into account. Today's architectural design problems have become complex and are changing dramatically. Many factors are influencing such changes. For example, population growth, increased demand, changes in social needs, economic consciousness, energy conservation, and environmental concerns. At first, the designers must document the existing conditions of a problem, define its context, and collect relevant data to be assimilated and analyzed. The site is described in terms of its surroundings, considering its location relative to significant features such as freeways, developments, local roads, lakes, and streams. Next, we identify critical areas and other environmental aspects, example, stands of trees, existing vegetation, on and adjacent to your site. These areas are documented on the site plan along with property boundaries, roadways, easements, and yard setbacks. Critical areas, buffers, and setbacks are depicted on the site plan along with all other zoning requirements. Context in architecture is the external factor that determine the architectural form and style, affect the choice of materials, and enable the building to relate with tangible or abstract situation. How a problem is perceived, defined, and articulated is related to the nature of the solution. Piet Hein said, "Art is solving problems that cannot be formulated before they have been solved. The shaping of the question is part of the answer." Architecture satisfies more than the purely functional requirements of a building program. Human activity is accommodated in the physical manifestations of architecture. How architecture promotes, endeavors, and communicates meaning is determined by the arrangement of forms and spaces. Form can be described as a reference to both the internal structure and external outline, often in the shape of a three-dimensional mass or volume. Some of the characteristics of form include the shape, size, color, texture, position, and orientation. Forms and spaces are a means to solve a problem in response to the conditions of function, purpose, and context. Architectural systems refers to the architecture of space, structure and enclosure which is experienced through the movement in space-time and achieved by means of technology accommodating a program compatible with its context. These systems should be interrelated to form an integrated whole having a unifying or coherent structure. Now coming to the first system of space, structure and enclosure, it constitutes the organizational pattern which brings together different forms and shapes and provides a cohesive structure to the design. Relationships refers to the ways in which different spaces within a building are related to each other, both physically and aesthetically, and how they are connected and interact with each other. These relationships are between the interior and exterior spaces, the connection between public and private spaces, and the relationships between different rooms within a building. Hierarchy is the articulation of spaces and forms in order of importance. It is achieved by differentiating size, shape, color, placement of forms and spaces relatively to each other. Hierarchy is used to emphasize a particular item and to influence the order in which a range of items are experienced. Formal image in architecture refers to an iconic representation in accord with established forms and conventions and requirements. Spatial definition is a term used in architecture for characteristics that, when looked at from a certain aspect, define the quality of a space. It includes formal qualities of space and also others like openness, visibility, expressivity, etc. Coming to the qualities, the first is shape. Shape is the characteristic outline of a particular form, the surface configuration of the volumetric form, and the principal aspect by which we identify and categorize forms. Color is an individual's perception of hue, saturation, and tonal value. It distinguishes a form from its environment and affects the visual weight of the form. Texture is the visual and especially the tactile quality given to a surface by the size, shape, arrangement, and proportions of the parts. It also determines the degree to which the surfaces of a form reflect or absorb incident light. Scale in architecture is measuring or ratio based on the relation of architectural elements with each other and their surroundings, along with being in harmony with human body geometry. Proportion is the visual effect of the relationship of the various objects and spaces that make up a structure to one another and to the whole. It is an important connection between mathematics and art and is used to create balance and harmony in a design. Now, surfaces construct the spatial effects by which architecture communicates. Through its surfaces, a building declares both its autonomy and its participation in its surroundings. Edges, we know, are the boundary lines, which are linear elements. Openings have protective and regulatory functions such as access and allows for the exchange of heat energy, light and air. Coming to the second system of experience, architecture is experienced through the movement in space-time. All experience of space is a time-structured process and all experience of time is a space-structured process. Time is the fourth dimension of space. The line of movement is an abstraction of human action and perception through different spaces and needs to be accommodated in the form of the building. The movement in space-time can be experienced in different ways. Approach and entry strongly influence our experience of an architecture space by how we arrive in it. Approach is the path you take to reach the building during which we prepare to see, experience, and use the spaces within a building. Entrance is from outside to inside, or from one interior space to another. It marks a transition from one space to another. We can experience movement while entering a building as it involves the act of penetrating a vertical plane that distinguishes one space from another. Path configuration means the linking sequences of space that users are taken through from a chosen starting point to specific destination point. The term access refers to the means or ability to approach and enter a place, site, etc. Forms of access include doors, escalators, lifts, stairs, ramps, etc. Sequence of spaces is a method of composition. It is a system of juxtaposition of a series of elements of similar nature according to a meaningful scheme. It is a process that we define and recognize first and foremost as an interdisciplinary tool, a theoretical method of approach to the infinite possibilities of composition or creative construction. Light, view, touch, hearing, and smell are related to architecture for the senses. Sensory cues induce emotive characteristics in a space and can strongly affect the user's experience. The rhythm of architecture can be felt by occupants as a result of the architect's composition or arrangement of all the sensorial qualities of space. Now, the third architecture system is achieved by means of technology. At the intersection of design, engineering, and science, architecture technology seeks to automate and augment the design process to quicken construction, support management, and ensure high performance of materials, systems, and structures. At present, innovations like building information modeling, also known as BIM, computational design, robotic fabrication, building performance analysis, and artificial intelligence dominate the discipline. Structure refers to a number of material elements working together, providing strength, stiffness, and stability in order for loads to be held aloft. All building structures share the same function, that is, to transmit the loads applied on a building safely to the ground, conserving its stability and stiffness. Structures are the elements that allow buildings to withstand the action of loads such as gravity, wind, earthquakes, impacts, and other environmental sources. Enclosure is the term given to any part of a building that physically separates the external from the interior environment. It is the building envelope, that is, the building's skin. Building performance depends on the interrelationships between the building enclosure and the external environment. Environmental protection and comfort can be achieved by providing a superior acoustic environment, maintaining optimal thermal comfort and quality ventilation comfort, creating a high quality visual environment including lighting, daylighting, and visual interest, providing furniture and equipment that will enhance the worker comfort and performance and provide user controls. Coming to health, safety, and welfare, the design of our built environment affects our health and well-being and can have long-term implications for quality of life. Whether it is ventilation, fire escape routes, or materials, health and safety always needs to be considered. Design strategies that increase industrial hygiene, air filtration, quality water, sunlight, water sanitation, and so on must be implemented. To plan in advance for safety threats, architects must keep in mind the number of entrances and exits, visibility inside rooms, placement of all windows and doors, design of main lobby area, etc. What we need to understand about welfare architecture is that good architecture can shape a better future, both for people and planet. Durability is the ability of a building to maintain over its lifetime the performance for which it was designed. It is a vital part of sustainable construction as insufficient durability can result in additional unexpected costs due to repair or reconstruction, as well as environmental and social impacts. Moving to the next architectural system of accommodating a program, an architecture program is what happens within a building or site. It is a detailed breakdown of the spaces within the project based on client requirements, user activities and needs, and spaces required for the building to operate. Focusing on user requirement helps in creating a highly usable, easily accessible and comfortable space for the users, and also helps in evolving innovation user-friendly design techniques. The users should be involved since the beginning of the design process and throughout the design process, and they must be involved with the design teams through a variety of research and surveys. Architecture and planning is also about supporting people to fulfill their dreams and meet their needs and aspirations. Aspirational architecture explores the aims and failures of architecture to form ideal communities and futures. It addresses how built space speaks to human need and desire for a better life individually and collectively. Socio-cultural factors have a great influence on the formation of architecture spaces and plays an important role in social sustainability. The cultural concept of architecture prioritizes its material meaning, and studying culture and its impact on architectural spaces is important in order to understand human behavioral patterns. Coming to economic factors, architecture is not only the reflection of the creative process of designing a building, but it has become a functional tool for understanding and enhancing the economic potential of space. Any form of development or construction affects the economic potential of land, directly or indirectly. Legal restraints refer to the many regulations that the activities and practices that a construction project must comply with. The most commonly relate to employment law, safety requirements, planning and building regulations requirements, environmental requirements, and so on. Moving to historical tradition and precedents, in terms of architecture, traditions are often given a physical manifestation in the form of spatial arrangement and ornamentation. Since ancient times, communities around the world have been looking upon their indigenous traditions for a sense of social unity and identity, which is often reflected in the tangible components of their built forms. In the field of architecture, precedents refer to existing buildings, structures, and design solutions that have demonstrated success and relevance. By studying and analyzing these precedents, architects gain valuable insights into the principles, strategies, and ideas that have shaped the built environment throughout history. Architecture precedents can take various forms. They can be iconic landmarks that have stood the test of time, representing the pinnacle of architecture achievements. They can also be vernacular buildings rooted in specific regions and cultures, showcasing the adaptation of design to local contexts and conditions. Regardless of their form, precedents serve as a foundation of knowledge that architects can draw upon to create meaningful, functional, and inspiring designs. The last architectural system is system compatible with its context. Architecture is the context inside which life synthesizes. Contextual architecture is a principle of design in which a structure is designed in response to its specific urban and natural environment. It refers to how a building's components are understood concerning its surroundings. Context in architecture is the external factors that determine the architectural form and style, affect the choice of materials, and enable the building to relate with tangible or abstract situations. There are various factors influencing the context in architecture. The first is site and environment, which includes the topography of the area, the site's history and previous uses, local culture, architectural style, local materials and construction techniques, political conditions, national and local policy, and the state of the economy. In terms of the built environment, context refers to the conditions which surround a particular site or project and to which it should relate and connect to in some way. The buildings and structures that make up the built environment do not exist in isolation but are conceived and designed in order to respond to, support, and enhance their surroundings. In short, the new structures must be compatible with their environment. Urban conditions such as building density, street, sidewalks, and their relationships, types, and arrangements of materials, building distances, urban traffic density, and population are examples of context. The second is climate, sun, wind, temperature, precipitation. In climate responsive architecture, architects should design buildings that respond to the climate and are living rather than consuming. It aims to design the optimized building according to specific characteristics of a particular site to minimize extreme energy use and have a reduced impact on the natural environment. The local climate, that is temperature, historical weather patterns, etc., the direction of the sun, that is sun path and solar position, site-specific environmental conditions such as wind, rainfall, humidity, the seasonality, and also taking into account the natural shade provided by the surrounding area and topography are all considered to design pleasant buildings which ensure physiological comfort of users, energy efficient buildings, and reduce reliance on artificial energy. Next is geography, referring to soils, topography, vegetation, and water. It involves data collection, extensive survey, imagination, and to solve problems with creative design solutions. Proper soil analysis helps understand the land stability, excavation, erosion, foundation, percolation quality, and plant growth suitability. The rocky plain or existing rock bed below the topsoil could act as beneficiaries for a strong foundation. Also, contours are a part of a study called topography and is the most informative analysis for the site. A topographic survey helps determine the natural drainage system at the site. The contours also reveals places that might be potentially good landscapes or spots from where selected points on the site can be visible or hidden. The different levels of the ground would create different view sheds for the site. Coming to flora and fauna, the designer should respect the habitat at a site. Conducting a study on the existing vegetation helps decide which ones are to be retained. The height and the foliage of the trees affect the viewshed at the site, while the trees themselves act as a cooling device for the site. The analysis should also include what plants and shrubs would grow in that area. Water survey helps to identify the area on site best suited for rainwater harvesting and groundwater replenishment. The catchments and watersheds are understood better with contour line plans and drainage lines at the site. The last one is sensory and cultural characteristics of the place. It is only by recognizing the fundamentally multisensory nature of perception that one can really hope to explain a number of surprising cross-modal environmental or atmospheric interactions, such as between lighting, color, and thermal comfort, and between sound and the perceived safety of public space. Looking to the future, the hope is that architectural design practice will increasingly incorporate our growing understanding of the human senses and how they influence one another. Such a multisensory approach will hopefully lead to the development of buildings and urban spaces that do a better job of promoting our social, cognitive, and emotional development. As we all know, architecture is manifestation and expression of culture. Shapes, forms, styles, and spaces are influenced by the cultural values of society. Any design, when conceptualized to perform a desired function, is directly or indirectly derived from or synchronized with the cultural identity of the user. In architecture, order refers to a system of rules that structure the shape, structure, layout, and proportions of a design. The elements and systems should be interrelated to form an integrated whole having a unifying and coherent structure. When the organization of parts makes visible their relationships to each other and to the structure as a whole, architecture order is created. A conceptual order exists when these relationships are perceived as mutually reinforcing and contributing to the singular nature of the whole. The physical order of architecture is constituted by form and space. In architecture theory, form typically refers to the physical essence and shape of a work of architecture. Form of a building can impact its functionality, aesthetic appeal, and overall impact on the environment. The relationship between form and function is a key consideration in architecture, as the form of a building must support and enhance its intended use. Space encompasses the volume of a structure, that is, the parts of a building we move through and experience. In architectural design, space is a critical element that can impact a building's function, atmosphere, and overall aesthetic. Architects use space to create a sense of flow and movement within a building, and to control the amount of light and air that enters, to separate public and private areas, and to define different functions within a building. In architecture, the term solid and void refers to the mass and space of a building. Solid elements are the positive or volume elements, while void elements are the negative or empty spaces. The solid-void relationship in architecture is engaged through the manipulation and arrangement of surfaces in a four-dimensional environment. Both solid and void are ways to define a volume of space. The second is interior and exterior. Interior deals with the layout and decoration of indoor spaces, while exterior is concerned with the face of a building that people see from the street. To complete an architecture composition, it is necessary to deal with both inner and outer space and to make a good connection between them. Organization of space in architecture is fundamental in creating a composition, as it brings together different shapes and forms and provides a cohesive structure to the design. The spatial organization represents the interaction between form and space. Some of the common relationships are space within a space, interlocking spaces, adjacent spaces, spaces linked by a common space, and so on. Next is structure. The creativity and imagination of an architect comes to reality by adopting a suitable structural system. Structure in architecture refers to the way in which the fundamental components of a building are arranged and interconnected. Structure is the designer forms with different materials. Many times, the structural system is not exposed but still has a significant influence on the form of the building. Enclosure represents a fundamental construct in architecture design pertaining to the representation of spatial arrangements. The architectural design intent must be sufficiently declarative to guide the selection and manipulation of enclosure elements so that aesthetics are harmonized with sustainability criteria for both the building envelope and the whole building system. A house is a machine for living in. It was stated by architect Le Corbusier in 1927. This way of thinking suggested a kind of machine aesthetic that became an important concept behind the functionality, channelization, and rational order that together laid the foundation of modern architecture. By particularly examining architecture as a machine system and how it could potentially depict spatial qualities that fulfill their functional purpose for human well-being, the idea of machine became a way to introduce scientific and logical reasoning as the basis of designing architecture through the establishment of standards, especially in designing domestic living spaces. Human beings had the same basic needs that could be standardized. The establishment of standard becomes necessary, not in generating standard architectural forms, but in defining the performance standard of architecture for human well-being. Perceptual order refers to the sensory perception and recognition of the physical elements by experiencing them sequentially in time. Approach in architecture is the first phase of the perceptual order and also of the circulation system throughout the building. While approaching a building, we prepare to see, experience, and use the spaces within a building. From a distant view, the architectural approach somehow obscures the distinction between inside and outside but guides us to the path of use of the space within a building. Departure in architecture is the area designated to the act of leaving. Think about an airport that has departure gates for outgoing passengers and an arrival area for people flying in. There are many types of departures, such as when you go to the store or take a flight. Entry or entrance is the threshold between the exterior and interior. It contributes to the overall identity of the development and plays an important role in the impression and experience formed by visitors. Entrances contribute positively to the streetscape and building facade design. Entrances provide functional and safe common areas. Egress refers to the means of going out. Fire safety code often requires a building to have multiple points of egress, which are places for people to exit, such as doors and fire escapes. A parking lot might have some one-way access points devoted to ingress and others devoted to egress. The means of egress or exits in a building refers to the safe and accessible routes that occupants can use to exit a building during an emergency or evacuation. Coming to movement through the order of spaces, the movement in architecture is an organized system of various types of movements stimulated by specific architectural elements. The first thing that comes up is the existing movement in architectural form and space that has stemmed from architectural elements in motion. Then, the visual movement of a spectator, followed by the physical movement of an explorer, attracts the attention. Next is functioning of and activities within spaces. When architects create spatial design for various types of uses and experience, they consider both the aesthetic quality of the space and how people experience interactions and sensations within these spaces. By devising the spatial relationships and programmatic layouts that spark chance encounters, encourage communication, interaction, and consolidate communities architects take a more active stand in providing the setting for social dialogue. Architects consider the idea of space planning by thinking about how the space can be best optimized for its particular purpose and for those who will be using it. One key principle of space planning is creation of zones for activities within the space. The last point is the qualities of light, color, texture, view, and sound. These are powerful perceptual elements of architectural design that can influence how people feel and behave in different spaces, that is, how they experience a space. Form, in combination with these elements, is what gives a building or space its unique character. The perception of space is directly connected to the way light integrates with it. Light renders texture and materials, illuminates surfaces, and creates atmosphere. It affects the whole of our alertness, well-being, performance, our visual understanding, aesthetic appreciation, as well as our biological and emotional health. The last one is conceptual order. Conceptual order in architecture is the comprehension of the ordered or disordered relationship among the building's elements and systems, and responding to the meaning they evoke. A concept can give a proper direction and sense to any project. It is the essence and soul of a design. Conceptual architecture can be expressed in words, images, feelings, aspirations, and atmospheres relating to that concept. An architectural concept critically engages the circumstances, brief, and situation and formulates them in an original way. As the visual language is one of the most important elements to an architect, drawings and images will always be the best way to express your ideas as how something should be made and how those ideas align with the architect's discourse and what's the idea behind the images to critique, analyze, or purpose something to inspire a new generation. Pattern in architecture is the idea of capturing architectural design ideas as archetypal and reusable descriptions. The patterns serve as an aid to design cities and buildings. Patterns helps to show how beautiful, comfortable, and flexible built environment can be constructed and to enable those people who will inhabit these environments to challenge any solution forced upon them. Signs vary widely but should not overwhelm the architecture of the building. The placement or location of a sign is perhaps the most critical factor in maintaining the order and integrity of the historic building. Consistent placement of signs according to building type, size, location, and even building materials creates a visual pattern that the user or pedestrian or driver can easily interpret and utilize. Finally, we come to context, space, forms, techniques, function. In an architectural sense, context gives meaning to parts of a building by reference to its surroundings. The context of a building includes physical or natural factors, for example, the curve of an adjacent river, socio-cultural factors, for example, the site's previous use, and so on. Space is an intangible attribute of a design defined in terms of forms, shapes, size, color, smell, time, Location and atmosphere. Form of a building usually gives the first impression as it attracts the eye towards the exterior of the building and can deliver the message of the building concept and its characteristics. Techniques is defined as the theory, principles, or study of an art or a process. It also refers to the technical details, rules, or methods. Function refers to the purpose of a building or structure. Form follows function is the principle that means that the purpose of a building should be the starting point for its design. Function follows form is a principle that emphasizes the importance of aesthetics and visual appeal in design. It suggests that the form of a design should be determined by the designer's artistic vision and that function should be secondary. The choice of which principle to follow will depend on the specific project and the designer's goals and priorities. Le Corbusier quoted that architecture is the learned game, correct and magnificent, of forms assembled in the light. Frank Lloyd Wright quoted that buildings too are children of the earth and sun. Thank you, viewers. I enjoyed explaining these concepts to you. Hope you too had a good learning experience. I need your constructive feedback for further improvement. Please do not forget to like, comment, and share my video and subscribe to my channel Archipellet. I'm signing off.